Let's get some facts. 37% of you aren't subscribed to this channel. That's almost 4 out of 10 just freeloading the alpha. So come on, hit subscribe and I promise to keep leveling up the show with the best guests and the juiciest insight. Go on, do it now.
Hi everyone, here we are again at day 2 of Solana Breakpoint conference in Abu Dhabi, and we have a very special conversation for you today, joined by Raj Gokal, co-founder of Solana. Raj, thank you so much for joining us. How are you doing today?
Thanks for having me. I'm doing well. Just day 2 of Breakpoint, and the energy is just insanely electric. So I'm feeling great.
No, that's so true. The energy is electric. It's contagious. You just can't help but feel the bullish vibes in the air at this conference. And this is the 5th Breakpoint conference. Can you talk to me a little bit about the evolution of Breakpoint? Because this is the most the largest one ever. So can you tell me a little bit about when you started to how it's grown to today?
Yeah, so, we launched the network in 2020, right as lockdowns started. And we really found our first users, our first developers, and most of the first 100 teams that formed building on Solana did it remotely over Zoom. So the first Breakpoint in 2021 was really about kind of throwing the biggest, most spectacular conference for people to finally meet up in person. I think it was more emotional and just cathartic and amazing than anyone had anticipated. We did it in Lisbon. There was a couple thousand people there. It's really been a straight line in attendance and growth, up to 7,000 this year, which is our largest Breakpoint ever. And the evolution of, mostly DeFi devs to mostly NFT devs to, kind of a smattering to, now really a super healthy institutional audience like JP Morgan and State Street are here, and Visa and MasterCard and really everyone. It's just been wild to see this magnitude of different audiences come together and find common ground on the network.
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of seeing the evolution of Breakpoint, we obviously can't talk about that without how Solana even started, right? So can you take us through that process of, as your journey as a founder, setting up Solana and, kind of how it's the beast that it is today?
Yeah. So, the core insight in late 2017 was that there was a very different approach to scaling blockchains that would not involve sharding. So Solana, pretty famously now is, in tens of thousands, moving into hundreds of thousands of transactions per second on one single state machine. It's not sharded. There's no layer 2s. And that at the time was a very controversial idea. But Anatoly spent his whole career building similar systems at Qualcomm. And in late 2017, early 2018, really nobody believed us. So we had this kind of wonderful, accident where when somebody did believe us and when somebody, did understand kind of how the architecture would work, they were really into it. So the validators that built on the testnet, they were fanatical, and they're still some of the biggest validators on the network today. The developers that showed up in 2021, they were building because they knew that this is what consumer and institutional grade crypto would look like. And even though it was pretty janky back then, they wanted to be there first. So I think in the early days, the founding was really just staying on message about performance being our niche, and then doing what we had to grow the network. We were talking earlier about hackathons. Our first hackathon was 100 devs, and we set up a Calendly and we called every one of them, and we wanted to know, why are you here? Why are you building? And what we found was it was kind of surprising, but nobody had ever done that to them. Having built in crypto for a while, that was kind of a new experience for them to talk to the founders of the chain that they were building on. So yeah, we have all kinds of stories like that, but I think the reason people still show up today is that we always committed to relentlessly pushing the performance of the network, the cost, the throughput, the latency, and that's what brought us here today.
Yeah, and I want to stick on that because that is a very unique thing in crypto that people don't get a chance to speak to the founders and the people and the creators and talk about things that they're building on their ecosystems. Can you talk a little bit about, your process and your thoughts behind curating a developer community and innovators into the Solana ecosystem?
Yeah, I mean, at this point, there's thousands of teams, so it's difficult to say that we're even really curating anything at this point, right? Mm-hmm. I think what we try to focus on is, one, what is there validated demand for in the market? And validation from our perspective means revenue. Again, a lot of this stuff we end up talking about is pretty simple, but for some reason, not everybody focuses on revenue when they think about applications on blockchains. Our focus on revenue has led to, 20 of the fastest growing companies that were the fastest to get to $100 million in revenue. About half of them were made in crypto, and most of those were built on Solana. I think that becomes a self-perpetuating culture. Who are the builders who are not interested in pontificating about what's going to work, but want to observe what works by building it and shipping it into the market? It's a very Silicon Valley mindset, so it seemed kind of obvious to us. But what ends up happening is the use cases that pass through that filter sometimes are things that we never would have imagined. Like, obviously there's like the meme coin thing. We had no idea that was going to happen. We didn't know in 2021 that Solana was going to have hundreds of thousands of NFT projects, that had multiple billions of dollars in trading volume and revenues. Just yesterday, Toli and I we were doing a robot boxing match outside. I won, by the way. And people think that's just a gimmick, like, some random entertainment thing. But the people who own those robots are actually training across a fleet of robots that are deployed in different environments with token incentives to keep the robots running, to collect data to train the upcoming explosion of humanoid robots. So similar to what Scale AI has done for training data for large language models. That company is using basically a DPIN token incentive network to bootstrap a really valuable data set of real world robot capture. So, it's wild, right? Like, we could not have imagined that, but because the founder, first of all, needed throughput, needed the scale, and did the smart thing, which is he probably built on multiple networks and tested different infrastructure to see what was going to get out of his way if his business really scaled. And then, he comes to Breakpoint and he sees that everyone is basically on the same page. They're trying to build a revenue generating business, where the infrastructure gets out of the way. I think that's what ultimately is the biggest curator of this community. It's not, me and Toli going through a list of startups and picking which ones we like.
Right. And what I think what's very impressive about Solana is that you guys lean into things. You don't, you just you adapt with the market. You mentioned the meme coins. You had no idea that was happening, but Solana didn't shy away from it. They didn't say, no, we're not a meme coin, type of ecos. You just let builders build and be who they are on your ecosystem. And I think that really speaks to why people really want to come to Solana and create, right? Because, you mentioned the throughput, you mentioned the speed, and then the support that the community gets, I think really kind of speaks to what you guys have done.
Yeah, I mean, it seems obvious to us, but the one of the core tenets of this technology is freedom of speech, freedom of expression, and freedom to build and use what you want without censorship. So it seems kind of counterproductive for us of all people, just because we had a hand in building the beginning of the network, to have an opinion and censure or try to take people out of the spotlight because they're doing something with it that we don't agree with. Obviously, you want to follow the laws, right? You don't want to steal. You don't want to commit any fraud. But people do weird stuff on the internet, and I think Toli and I both came up in a time when that was where most of our friends was like weird people that we connected with over weird interests on the internet. So as long as people are having fun and coming together over it, I think it's a good thing.
Yeah, now I want to, we obviously talked about developers and innovators, but I want to kind of talk about the entire, the mainstream of crypto. And you shared a very interesting story on stage about, how you got your first email address, because, you wanted to receive a gift from a friend, and how you related that to, people got their first wallets because of the meme coin craze. How do you think about, kind of onboarding the masses and, kind of whether that's in Solana or just kind of crypto in general?
Yeah, I mean, I think just like with the internet and with personal computing and mobile devices, the thing that product represented for different audiences was just completely like for an investment banker, an iPhone was an email machine. For a teenager, it was like a sexting machine. For grandmas, it was like a FaceTime machine for seeing their grandkids more often, right? And like being unopinionated about what those identities for this product is for those different audiences, but not just being unopinionated, amplifying them, right? So we're here in Abu Dhabi, during Abu Dhabi Finance Week. Engaging with the local government here, with the regulators, with the royal family, because, they see this as financial infrastructure. And they see tokenization as the next frontier to improve access, transparency and trust for Abu Dhabi as a financial center. That is a fully fledged, use case and identity for the network that is completely different than how, teenagers in the US view the network. But I think you can serve all of them at the same time, especially on a decentralized network where, this is not a rent-seeking network. Everyone who builds on top can make their own businesses and tell their own story of what the network is.
Now, I want to talk to you because, as someone who's seen so many startups being created, obviously creating successful ones yourself, what do you think are, kind of the ingredients that make a successful startup versus one that ultimately, might fail or not be successful?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest factors that I've seen that I'll focus on the ones that are within your control. One is, grit and determination of the founder or the founders. And there are ways to amplify your grit and determination. If you have another person that you're just like ride or die with, sometimes it's just going to be the fact that you're both committed to showing up for each other that gives you that grit and determination, which is why I think, everyone benefits from having a co-founder if it's the right co-founder. I think that, the next thing is, a lot of startups get into a mode of, losing touch with their instincts as leaders, and they look to investors or conferences and keynote speakers to get a sense of what they're supposed to do with their time. But no one is ever going to know your business and your product as well as you do. So I think founders need to really like lean into their instincts and treat the evolution of their ability to listen to their instincts as like a skill. That's a skill set that you can improve and compound over time. I think just having the wrong people on board is what kills startups next, right? You can have grit and determination. You can listen to your instincts as a leader, but ultimately you're only one person. And if you have, 10% of your team that's just a bad cultural fit, or the wrong skill set or the wrong ratio of skill sets, like I like to have around, at least one engineer to one non-engineer, or maybe even two engineers to one non-engineer, because the engineers, their language is building. That is the only language they know. Everyone else has a lot of other languages and they take a lot of time. So, I think team composition and being really thoughtful and relentless about it in the first like 6 months, that determines the fate of the company for the rest of the time.
It's very powerful stuff. I mean, now I want to kind of just talk about Solana in general and kind of what excites you the most about the future of Solana and where it could be?
Yeah. I think in some ways everything is going exactly according to plan. The idea was performant network, that's at least amongst the most performant, and reliably so. One state machine, so everything's composable, and go after all of finance. All of trade execution and finance specifically. And and building a profitable, economically sustainable network through something like priority fees is not it's not a trivial endeavor, and we're taking all of these things for granted now that exists. So I think what's exciting for me is just watching the unfolding of what is already just has relentless momentum. I think there were some really big pieces of news this week, like JP Morgan launching a $100 million private credit fund on Solana, State Street and Galaxy, doing issuances on Solana. Massive banks that have a choice. Galaxy that could have issued anywhere, and they're saying, we could only really do this on Solana to get the performance we need. And if you talk to them, it was easy. Like a year ago, it was not easy. That now, their teams are able to deploy these things basically without any help, because of things like token extensions that give you a toolkit for compliance, for these on-chain assets. It's, this is just the beginning, right? For me, I have a rule of threes. Once I see three of something that is of a similar nature that happens, that kind of represents product market fit. If those three things happen quickly and without your help, you're about to see a lot more, and you just need to get ready. I think there are actually multiple areas where that rule of threes has played out. Even something as simple as DePIN, like the, Bit robot that's got a functioning business, token incentivizing deployment of robots. HiveMapper has the same functioning business incentivizing deployment of dash cams for collecting street map data. Helium has the functioning business, right? You've got, that's three, right? And it's a weird thing, but sometimes once three happens, that you get enough triangulation where you can see all the design space inside of it, and what we need is just for the awareness of these validation points to get as wide as possible, as quickly as possible, because that'll bring the next builders.
And I think that's what excites people so much about Solana, because you guys have those threes on so many different fronts, not just DePIN, right? We're seeing it in DeFi, just all across. You have to see gaming, just so many different things that you're seeing that in. And I think that's what makes people so excited about Solana. So I want to kind of go back to the beginning as well, when you first started Solana. What's something? Let's go back to the early days. Raj and Toli are, in the lab building Solana. What's something, if I told you what happened today back then, that would absolutely, you would have never expected?
There are a lot of things. Okay, I'll give you two that are very different. One is the government of Bhutan just issued on-chain state-backed gold tokens on Solana, and I didn't know about it until I saw it in the news. A national government choosing this chain and doing something real like issuing gold is just I thought it would have taken a lot longer for something like that to happen. And then the second one, we already talked about the robot thing. I think I could not have imagined that, it would be, that the network would support maybe in bringing humanoid robots forward by a year, right? Like, that's very feasible to imagine because training data is so important in deploying these things. I would not have imagined that. And then there's a third one that happened a while ago. It was, the Degen Trash Panda NFT project. And so this collection of NFT holders crowdfunded a sculpture made out of plastic bottles to be outside of the UN delegation when they were voting on the bans of single-use plastics in, I think, Europe. And I never expected that something, a community would form and then use their shared treasury to kind of pull off a stunt to affect something so meaningful and impactful on a global scale. And all of these, it's like candy at Halloween or like presents at Christmas. I just love, opening up Twitter and seeing the news of these things happen. And there's probably hundreds of stories like this that I don't even know.
So many.
It's a real joy.
Yeah, I had the pleasure of knowing two people that have basically they're tokenizing wine on the blockchain, and Solana was their choice, right? It was a no-brainer for them to use Solana. So it's just absolutely incredible what you guys have have built with Solana, and what the developer and the innovative community is just kind of running with. And that's a credit to what you got, to you guys as well. So I want to kind of before we wrap up here, I just want to ask you, like, what's one thing you want people to take away from this conversation, maybe about the future of Solana, about crypto, or just about being an entrepreneur, just starting up a company in general?
What I used to talk about when people ask that question is decentralization. Like, all of this performance, all of this user grade and institutional grade adoption is happening on a network that's actually permissionless and decentralized. And like, most people don't even really know or care about that. But when you look under the hood, Solana has it, and that's special. Now what I would say is, I think leadership is important, and leadership turnover, and what we care about in Solana is Tolly and I want to be irrelevant quickly. I mean, I think in many ways we already are. Any kind of ossification in the leadership, informal structures of this network are ones that we want to break. Like, and the hackathons are a great way to do this. If you talk to hackathon winners, it's like American Idol. The fact that they go from being absolutely nobody knows who they are, nobody cares, and they might as well be just another person that walked in off the street at Breakpoint, to being, true leaders because they built something and they competed in the arena, and, most of them get real revenue and users. And I think, so if anybody's ever like hesitant about, going out and just trying to build something, I think they should know that it's an ecosystem that really goes out of its way to create that mobility for new leadership to come out, because we're all going to win if new leaders can come here, enter the arena, and grow.
Raj, it's been an absolute pleasure. Very enlightening conversation. Really fascinating to just hear the journey of yourself and just Solana in general. So really appreciate you taking the time to sit down with us today and, kind of explain all of that. Thanks you.
Thanks so much. And thanks for coming. I hope you've had a great Breakpoint.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So you obviously like this video enough that you've got to the end. That's quite a big task. But listen, do me a favor, hit the like and subscribe button, and also check out what video's next, because I think you'll love it. But if you want even more, and when I'm talking more, I'm talking about member-generated ideas, incredible alpha, research, everything there to help you in your journey, just head to realvision.com/join for the best financial intelligence out there and the pure alpha that's within the platform.